The following episode of TOFOP is rated MA for mature audiences. It may contain sexual references, time travel references, allegations of bin misconduct, and mild coarse language. TOFOP advises that this episode is not suitable for anyone under the age of 15 or anyone who thinks a comedy conversation between two old mates sounds like a terrible idea for a show. Minors must be accompanied by a parent or guardian. This is John Deek speaking.
Everyone relax, this is TOFOP. I'm Charlie Clausen.
I'm Will Anderson. Hello and thank you for watching. So we're doing this very late. It is 2 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon, which is very late for us to record an episode of TOFOP, and that means that you're going to edit it. No podcast mic today, and it means that James Fosdyke does not have the normal sort of 24 to 48 hours that he kind of hopefully has most weeks to be able to put together the artwork. So he has requested in our WhatsApp chat that if we talk, could we talk about blackouts, snowstorms, and stick figures? So you can pick one or any of those topics to start with. Which would you like?
I'm not going to talk about any of those things. I was almost going to text Foz to give him a heads up because I do have something I want to talk about, which I think it falls quite squarely into TOFOP territory. But I thought I'll let him listen to it because I don't want to direct. I don't want to. We've never dictated what Foz creates. Sometimes, we'll be on a real tear on a subject and in my head, I'm like, oh, well, I can't wait to see the artwork for this. It's definitely going to be that. And then he'll zig where we've zagged. In this instance...
Well, I'm going to set, I don't know what this is, but I'm going to set myself the challenge to incorporate at some stage into this scenario or story, but a blackout, a snowstorm, and some stick figures.
Well, this might be something we've actually discussed previously because it involves a moving house, which I'm doing at the moment. We're packing up our apartment in Sydney. We're all in on the Northern Rivers, baby. We're letting go of the apron strings. And so I've been down in Sydney the last few days, which is why TOFOP is late this week because I missed my flight, actually. We got to the airport like just at the cutoff. Ordinarily, when you just got you and your bags, it's fine. But when you have a baby, Will, everything takes a little bit longer because it's all oversized and they can't just chuck it on the trolley and whack it on the plane. So we got to the airport, literally, I think it was, we got to the airport in time, but by the time we got to the kiosk and then put our details in, it had cut us off. And then by the time we joined the line to get to the front of the queue to speak to someone, we were way behind. And this woman... it's almost
like we don't ever take any of that time into when we think we're getting to a place, though, isn't it? Like we're just like the minute we're through the door, stop the clock. Like I'm here. I should be able to get on the plane.
Yeah, it's like a save point in a video game. I don't actually consider what happens when I get to the save point. I just assume, well, I'm here. It's a finish line, right? The woman, the attendant who helped us out, actually. She was great. I mean, she was the one who came over and explained, look, we can't get you on. They've closed up the luggage or whatever. And so we were like, oh, okay. Is there another flight we can get on? And she did this sort of whole song and dance about there is another flight, but the onus is on you. You turned up late. So we kind of not aggressively, but just sort of stated our case that, well, we actually got here on time. Like the kiosk
we were through the door. Stop the clock.
Yeah,
we both yelled out, stop the clock. It's over. Through the door.
We broke the tape. It's a finish line. We win. We just explained, but the benefit of having a small child with you, the negative is it slows you down and you got more luggage to check in. The benefit is no one's really going to be too mad at you because they know that, your fucking day is challenging as it is. Most people aren't going to make it harder for you.
Oh, that's often when I have an issue in that same sort of customer service scenario. I will actually just go up to a random stranger and give them $20 to take their baby just for the interaction.
Not even a baby. Sometimes you just go to a small person and say, hey, can you just jump into my arms? I'm going to wrap a blanket around you.
Let me swaddle you. Mate,
dude,
up
I've
on
got
the
a
table,
beard.
you let me swaddle you. I've got to just settle this issue about the latte.
Well, it turns out I'm a method actor. If you're going to swaddle me, I'm going to soil myself. You okay to change my nappy? All right.
I'm not going to change it, but that's fine.
So, she took pity on us and she said, look, I'll call her supervisor and see if we can get on the next flight. And I've got to say, I think she really, I don't know if it's technically a power trip, but she enjoyed being our only hope. Like, I think she took great pleasure in, I don't know what the person on the other end of the line was saying, but she made it look like she was negotiating like a Middle East peace deal. Like she was sort of explaining our situation and look, if there's anything that could be done, and I understand that, these are the rules, but blah, blah, blah. And so she kept looking to us.
Here's what I would say is I'm interested to know what the truth of this dance actually is, because does an employee on the front line have the power of veto over a boss higher in the chain? Like, is that is that their task? I mean, it might be how they're empowered in that role. Like, it might be part of their role that, you have some discretion, but you just need to flag it with us. If you can make the case, then we're happy to sort of bend the rules a little. Or this is hey, if there's ever an issue, it's okay. I'm not even going to be on the other end of the phone. I'm just going to put the phone down for a little bit, and you pretend like you're negotiating with me as hard as you want to. No offense. We find it really diffuses a lot of situations.
Well, if I was to take a guess, I think that the supervisor on the other end of the line was actually not putting up that much resistance. But I think this lady was putting on a big show of how much she wanted to get us across the line, and that,
the supervisor said that's fine and hung up, and she kept talking. She's
exactly. No. God damn it. These people need to get on this plane. God damn it. Well, the thing was, so she was advocating on our behalf to this person on the end of the line, saying, look, they got here on time. Apparently the kiosk took a long time. Then they couldn't get through the queue, blah, blah, blah. They have a baby. They've got a pram. They've got a baby seat, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and adding on some mayo. You wouldn't believe it, the conditions. There was the snowstorm. There was the blackout.
Ah, nice. A couple of skinny people walked in through the door. They looked like stick figures. She went through this thing of advocating like it was a courtroom drama. She was in our corner. She was a plucky public defender standing up for the good guys. So she gets us, onto the next flight. That's all good. She hangs up. She starts picking up new boarding passes. Then she flips it. Then she goes from plucky public defender to real scold, real scold. She's got the boarding passes in her hands, but before she hands them over, she lets us know that we cut it too fine.
Yeah, it's a teachable moment. She has identified a teachable moment, and she has got you what you need. And then she thinks that you need to also learn an important lesson, because this is a one-off. This is an exception. She has bent the rules this day, but this was your warning.
It sounds like, did you write the script for her? Because that's almost word for word what she was saying. She's like, this never happens. This never happens. Don't expect that you can rock up to the airport this late. You've really got to give it more time than you have. And so we were putting up no resistance. It wasn't like we were.
Because you've got what you wanted.
We got what we wanted.
To receive a lecture.
Yeah, it was just, I mean, it's a good thing I had my mask on, because there was a big smile on my face, because I was like, this is wonderful theatrics. I'm really enjoying. She's got some time on the mic now. She's going to really give it some. And so.
Also, if there is such a time imperative, this seems like unnecessary time wasted for us rushing through with our baby through security. But anyway, sure. Go on, please.
Well, the time wasn't a problem at that, because we're on the next flight. So there's going to be a couple of hours.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But the funny thing was, so while that is all going on, there was a very glamorous, she looked like a model, designer clothes, perfect hair. She was also trying to check in at one of the kiosks behind us, but she also, I assume, had turned up too late, and she didn't have nearly as much luggage as us, just a couple of, a small suitcase and maybe some hand luggage. And so after we got the scold and the lecture and, be on your way, we gave the boarding pass. I saw, because the model type lady was observing us. So she was like, okay, well, this lady seems very helpful. So she walked up.
She'll be fine.
After us. To dessert.
Hi. I'm a model with no baby.
No way. Bloody double whammy, get stuffed. No one's helping you. You already won. You've already won in life. You won the lottery of looks. No one's helping you, lady.
Yeah, fuck you. Fuck the sisterhood. Burn it all down.
It was brilliant. It was brilliant. I did actually end up seeing that girl. I think she eventually, I don't know if she ended up having to pay her way into the flight, or maybe she had to endure a longer lecture than we did, but she did eventually make it onto the flight. But all of this is a long way of talking about packing up the apartment, which has been, it's been quite a more cathartic and more emotional than I was anticipating. Because
how long have you been in that apartment?
5 years. 5 years. But we have belongings in there that have spanned not only our entire relationship of 17 years, but before we met each other. Excuse me. We have photo albums and keepsakes and family heirlooms and all this kind of stuff. But we sort of had made this decision that we're not going to bring everything with us.
We're going to set it all on fire. We're going to burn the apartment down for the insurance.
All on fire. Because Gemma, as you know, was often in our group of friends was the photographer. She was always the one with the camera out and snapping photos. And so we literally have, dozens of boxes of old school photos. Kids, before your iPhones, if you wanted to capture a moment, you had to get a bloody camera or a little disposable camera. So, we have all these memories. And so we basically, divided the piles up and said, go through. We're not keeping everything, only key moments, only key memories, only key moments. And so it was kind of like this, it was a trip down memory lane that made me go, because there was photos of us, in our 20s when, God, we were young and thin and just so full of fucking hope and the world had so many possibilities in it.
Oh, man,
and I was looking at this photo.
Hope was probably the name of one of the pills.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I was looking at this photo of me and a bunch of friends all over at the full moon party in Thailand in like 2000, I think it was. Probably tripping on mushrooms, I'd say. I don't remember much about the full moon party, so I'm assuming that's what happened. But I was looking at this photo and going, that saying about youth being wasted on the young, it's so true. It's so true because if you could take the knowledge you had now and go back, you would go, hey kid, look, sorry, young guys enjoying your party. I just want you to just take more time with this moment. Like just enjoy this because it's not going to last long. You think you're going to be young and invincible forever, but it's not going to last that long. So
who's this Debbie Downer? Who's this old guy ruining the fun? Who called the cops?
It was so that era in my life. It feels simultaneously like yesterday, but also a million miles away from where I am now. I don't want to go back to that time. I don't want to go to the full moon party.
Right? Because you could.
Yeah.
Like you actually could.
Yeah.
Like you could go to the full moon party. Well, not at the moment, but at some stage in the future, you could probably go to the full moon party. You could trip on mushrooms. You could be, even some of those parties we went to as young people, there was like an old person there. Like there was always some random old person.
There was always some guy, normally asleep on the couch, grumbling.
Was having their like 20s again or whatever. Like you could be that. You could be the dude paying for the drinks, like that everyone like. I mean, that was a bit like what it was like for you on Home and Away. Like as in you were surrounded by this younger generation of like people who were living through those times where you had already sort of mostly graduated from those times. But because you worked with them and you were friends with them, occasionally you were probably dragged into some of their good young times, reconnecting with like, oh yeah, that used to be me.
Yeah, 100%. I think hanging around young people, like there was those times where it's like, oh yeah, like this is exciting for a minute. Like it's exciting for a minute.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, I think where it would always be a reality check was like, so just say, one of the kids I went to a 21st, for instance, and that was fine. And, that was all fun. And then because they're all in their 20s, they want to go to a nightclub afterwards.
Yeah.
And I would go to the nightclub. And as soon as I walked in, I'm like, ugh. I made a mistake. It was fine at the house when everything was sort of contained, but now this is hard work. It's too loud, and there's nowhere to sit. And why does it smell so weird in here?
I was thinking about when I gave up on going out to places, and it was quite a long time ago. I remember, when I was in LA, I lived there for like 10 years on and off, and I never went to I went to the Chateau Marmont, do you know what I mean? But I didn't. Like I never went to like a nightclub or out on the town. I had agents at the time who were like, if you ever want to be on like the door at some club or like sort you out and stuff like that. And I just, even then was like, that does not seem like something that I would enjoy doing. And the idea now that I ever did is becoming so foreign to me. Like I was thinking about it. I was in Wagga Wagga on the weekend doing shows. So, it's Saturday night and you do your show. And I just go back to like a Quest motel and eat a Domino's pizza and that's my Saturday night, which I am fine with. Watch the footy in bed, like it's fine. But there would have been a period of time in my life where you'd be like, oh, great. Now, like the show's done. Like,
let's
where's
go
the party at? Let's go to the pub. Let's go and meet people. Let's go and like have some fun and some adventures and
I guess
decisions.
It's sort of like what you were looking for back then. Like you're either wanting to get like wasted or wanting to chase girls or, so none of those things really appeal. Like I am at a stage now where even like.
I'm not drinking now.
Yeah.
On Sunday night, I had a cup of tea on stage. Like I was like, why not? I took out a cup of tea and I just like for the first half of the show was just drinking a very nice cup of tea while I was doing my show.
Well, it's not so much that I'm not drinking. I just drink much harder liquor because I don't have to drink as much of it. So a glass of scotch of an evening will do me quite nicely. So while I'm doing this trip down memory lane and stuff, and just really having to choose what's going to come and what's not going to come, and shredded like 15 years worth of tax and business documents, which is very cathartic. Anything that's beyond that kind of, that threshold for if I'm possibly audited. But it's amazing, like, to think now that everything's digital. Like, I do all my tax and business on online software. And it's like, I literally went into the office, works with this guy and said, how does the shredder work? And he's like, well, you just, bring up your binders. And I said, no, you don't understand. I've got a car filled with close to 20 years worth of like business and tax documents. I'm going to be coming up and down here like the Master's Apprentice, that Disney film. And he's like, no, it's all right. And then after the 6th big giant plastic tub of documents that I brought up, he was like, mate, we only have one bin. We do it offsite. It's one shredding bin. You're going to have to come back tomorrow. So I had to do 2 separate visits to just shred like an entire kind of part of my life. Like, Gemma and I had a production company together, and, we have literally piles and piles of rushes and tapes and hard drives filled with stuff that we've shot. And it's like, I feel like sort of we should archive this, but at the same time, I never want to see any of this again. Like, is this important to my narrative? Is this something Iona is going to be curious about? Like what mum and dad used to do? Like, will anyone want to see this?
Yes, I think so. I think you've got to keep like
something
things that sum up a greater whole. So like whatever it is, like there's 40 photos about like, a night out with particular friends, and you're just like, look, this one photo really just reminds me of that night and that time, and that's going to be, I think sometimes that's more powerful anyway. Then there's that one photo that reminds you of your time. It's like an anchor to those times rather than like a series of photos that you don't have enough of a connection to every one of them. That night becomes about that one particular photograph, and then eventually that story is just whatever you feel about that night and that time is triggered by just looking at that one image. I think you've got to keep, but yeah, like things like, that your parents made films, or like, you don't have to have everything. There's probably stuff you don't want to show, but like evidence that was part of your life is very important, I would have thought.
Yeah. I
mean, she's obviously got, 300 quality podcasts to listen to.
There are some, the thing about, you notice about when you're looking at celluloid, like film photos you've taken, is that like nowadays with your phone, you'll snap like 10 photos of the same thing. Whereas back then you're a bit more specific about what you'd photograph, or you'd actually make people get together so you could snap a shot. You weren't just as happy snappy. But my rule was basically, if there's anyone in this photo that I'm not still friends with, see you later. Like unless it's like a really good photo and there just happens to be someone. But there's ex-girlfriend holidays that I went on with ex-girlfriends. There was like, when I did my sort of gap year holidays and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, I guess this is interesting. It's me sort of backpacking around Vietnam and India and Thailand and stuff. But how many photos of this do I need? Because I literally had...
You need enough that if at some stage your life becomes something that people want to reflect on, like, whether it's like a book about your life or a movie about you or sort of... Well, you never know. There still might be shit to come. Even if it's just like you're the dad of the woman who came up with the scientific formula that healed humanity or whatever.
Can you believe this moron, this guy who had this podcast, his daughter invented like perpetual energy?
I mean, maybe.
Well, okay. So what's your take on journals? Because there's probably close to 20 journals, and a lot of them, like I would never go back and read. They were just like stream of consciousness kind of journals. But I was like, my mum, when she passed away, left behind a bunch of journals, and we loved those. Like, but my mum was in a weird way much better writer than I was. Mine are just all like blah, whereas she was, she would sort of think about something and put pen to paper when she had something to actually say. Would you keep, how many of those journals would you keep?
Oh God, there's the whole previous shows that were the distillation of my entire ideas for a year into 1 hour that I want to burn. The idea that like I would like, no, I was actually talking to Alex Lee for an episode of Philosophy that people will get to hear soon, about the idea that, because I had a near-death experience recently and I'm absolutely fine, not injured in any way. It was just one of those things that 10 centimeters another way could have had disastrous consequences. And one of the things that I kept coming back to is, at the moment, I have so many half-finished projects. And I was thinking about which of those projects I would be happy for somebody to finish like posthumously.
Yeah, right.
And which of them I would like people to to the point where I'm thinking, should I have a file that says delete upon death, which is just like ideas that are not at a point that I want people to know that that is my idea.
You don't want a Jeff Buckley situation where suddenly your mum's kind of getting all your kind of all your session tapes and just like remastering them and releasing them as complete songs, when clearly it was just Jeff doodling around with a guitar.
Jeff Buckley's mum and Tupac's mum get in a room and they're like, with my mum, and they're like, we've got a way we can really monetize some of this shit. Like,
we've got a bunch of knock-knocks, but we've got no punchlines. What do we do with that?
Yeah. I mean, because there's things on there that sometimes just are almost notes to myself about things that, like, often they just sit around, and sometimes they, like, for example, there was an idea I had a couple of years ago about like writing a comedy movie that was about a bunch of like people. Essentially, it was just like, I was trying to think of something that you could just shoot in one house, basically, you know, like, and so the idea was that these group of people would fake to this family, this really rich family that had like an emergency, like sort of, you know, bunker or whatever, like a panic room style situation, but more like a survivalist sort of like bunker, because they were paranoid about the end of the world, that they would fake the end of the world in order to rob them, essentially was the premise of the thing. And then it was just like a comedy sort of like set piece about that unfolding. And then like Parasite happened, and now there's like an Australian TV series that's like about the staff robbing like a necklace. So it's just one of those ideas now that will never become anything more than what it was, because some other things have stepped into that space and sort of like done their own things in there. But I haven't deleted it yet because there was something good in the idea originally that like maybe I'll use for something else. But I don't want people just finding that shit and just going, why was his idea for a movie 2 other movies that have already been made?
It's funny because I think with all the personal journaling stuff, I got rid of most of those. But I found stuff like, you know, when Michael Chamberlain and I were at uni together when we were 19, like sketches that we wrote and just all these little things that are like, oh, this is interesting. Like I think, you know, maybe if Iona does have an interest in creative writing at some point, that, you know, that's something I can share with her. Like I have, you know, through primary school, all my exercise books where I wrote my short stories and all that kind of stuff.
Surely for TOFOP content alone, you've got to keep those.
Well, that is, I mean, we
are thinking about doing a live show again at some stage, and I would have thought that going through your early diaries to see what comedy gold you were coming up with back then might pad out a lot of that time.
Don't worry, I have thought about that. That's definitely
read by John Deeks, perhaps. Like, I mean,
that's a great idea.
John Deeks reading your childhood stories.
That's really good. I mean, there are some extraordinary ones where I'm like, how did my teachers let me get away with this? This is clearly a troubled kid. Like, I think if it was today, I'd be referred to some kind of counselor. Like, one was just like a violent
how long are these
fantasy.
Stories?
Oh, like some of them are just like easily, you know, like just one full scat page. There's one that about fantasizing about my sister being murdered by a wolf man.
Oh, mate, we should honestly, like, for the next live show, we should get Deeksy to read the stories, and then we just kind of like dollop style, we TOFOP in between, like just riffing off these stories. That should be what the live show is. That would be so much fun.
I just, as we're talking, just a little side note, I just got an email from the 20 Volt studio. They want me to join them for an 8-week winter challenge. Hi, Charlie. We're launching our very first 8-week winter challenge starting July 1st. Let's walk towards your fitness goals and get your body ready for summer. What do you reckon? Click. Have I learned anything?
I mean, 8 weeks. I mean, that's like 300 years worth of exercise, isn't it?
Yeah, according to them. No, all of this, Will, is leading to one question that I thought that maybe you could help me out with. And I feel like maybe we've discussed this before, but we never got to an answer. But One of the things that I have in my apartment in Sydney is like a family. Well, it's not really a keepsake because no one in my family wanted it. I, for some reason, decided I want to keep it. But as you know, my father was a dentist. And when you are practicing medicine or when you're studying medicine, they often give you like, things to work on. And because he was a dentist, my father had a human skull, which he would use when he was at university. So this is an actual human skull, someone who donated their body to science. It had been in the family for a long time. And I think there's even a photo of my dad going to a fancy dress party dressed as Hamlet, and he's got like the skull. He's doing the Yorick speech, which I always thought was pretty clever. So I have this skull in my possession in my apartment in Sydney, and Gemma is adamant that the skull is not coming with us to the Northern Rivers. She's like, the skull, we're done. We don't need the skull. I don't want the skull in the house. I don't want Iona finding the skull. So I'm now left with the situation of how do I dispose of human remains and how do I do it in a way?
Well, I mean, yes, because I want to explore the idea. So firstly, in an improv sense, yes, and strap me in. Very happy to explore it. However, just on a really practical note, we'll have your skull.
You want the skull?
Amy would love the skull, I'm sure. Like, and that way, the skull is not in your house, but you know that the skull is, if at any stage you need to feel connected to your dad and you need to, like, you know where the skull is at short notice.
Yeah. All right. Well, that seems like all right. Well, problem solved.
But, I mean, I have just offered without running it by my partner that we bring human remains into the house. So I will have to run it by her.
The funny thing was that because Mum had the skull in her apartment. So after she passed away and, me and my brothers and sisters cleaned out her apartment, so we did this thing of we went around each room and before we either donated to charity or we sold or whatever. And so, but any family member had the opportunity to say, I want to keep that. So, and I thought there was going to be like a stampede towards a skull. In my head, it was like, because growing up, it was like, only on special occasions would Dad go to the cupboard, go to the top shelf, unwrap the skull and let you hold the skull. It was like a big deal. So in my head, it was like this.
First time you went into a bar and you saw the top shelf liquor, you were like, oh, where they kept the skull. That's
get out.
Skull it. Let's get that.
Yeah. Well, I guess isn't that Dan Aykroyd? Isn't his tequila or
That's
something?
True.
Or his vodka
it is.
that comes in a crystal skull?
You basically invented that before Dan Aykroyd. Your dad
is Dan Aykroyd.
Dan Aykroyd.
So, no one wanted it. And so I got the skull. And I remember because I flew it from Melbourne to Sydney and I just put it in my hand luggage. And I was like, well, this could get awkward. Like as I go through security, if it sends off any sensors and someone's like, why are you traveling with a human skull? But it didn't. I was actually surprised it did not, because it looks like a skull. I mean, as it goes through the x-ray, surely, I mean, the jaw is kind of dislocated. It's sort of held on with wires. But surely someone should have picked up that there's a human head in that guy's luggage.
I mean, yes, but there's no restrictions against taking a human head onto a plane, is there? Like,
I think there is. I think I think you can't travel around with. Isn't it like biohazard or something like that?
No, because if it had bits of flesh on it still, sure. But like this is clearly a dried up old skull. I think you can probably.
Is that okay?
Travel from state to state with a dried up old skull.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't feel as bad about that. Okay. So let's you adopting the skull aside.
Yeah.
If I had to dispose of it, what would you suggest? I mean, because initially I was like, well, I'll just bury it. And then I'm like, no, that creates problems whoever moves into the house because then they'll dig it up. They won't know where it's come from. They'll call the police. They'll have to do some kind of dental record check and then it gets traced back to my family and perhaps someone gets in trouble.
Could you combine, just in your scenario, because what you're talking about is the idea that you want to put it somewhere, it's in Sydney, you don't want to travel with it because obviously you live in the country now. So if you needed to dispose of it, it would be very easy to do. You could just find some place in the country and
even then I feel bad because bushwalkers always seem to find bodies. Like Jem gets really worried whenever.
But where we live, you would dig up three other bodies actually trying to bury your skull. No one's. It's like just non-stop skull.
I'm always saying to Jem, whenever we drive through like a dense part of the forest or whatever, I'm always like,
I could murder someone here.
Yeah, you could just stop. I could stop the car right here, murder someone, and throw them in the ditch. Wouldn't even have to bury them that deep, and no one would ever find them. I mean, who's going to be looking in this exact spot? But they always do.
No, they don't. Like we hear of the ones where they do. It's all the ones that they like. Is your honest opinion that like every buried body gets stumbled upon? Because I actually think they're stumbling upon a small percentage of the buried bodies.
Oh, that's a good question. Are there more bodies buried that haven't been discovered than ones that have been discovered?
There's lots of people go missing and are never seen again.
I guess so. I don't know. I just figured that, like, whenever you hear those stories, you know, like with Ivan Milat and stuff, it was like it's so unlikely that someone would find those bodies, but they did. Like he went out of his way.
Eventually, though, like he killed a whole bunch of people first, which means that you can get away with it. You know,
I guess
he was also like a success. Like he showed that even a guy who can get caught can get away with it for a fair while. So that says to me that there are people who are smarter and more cunning and more evil than Ivan Blatt who just have got away with it.
Okay, but we're not like we're doing nothing smarter than just burying. We're not like incinerating or destroying the evidence first. It's just burying. Well, tell me this.
The fact that you're even referring to it as evidence is problematic. I would start it's because it is not. You've got to stop thinking about it as something that you...
I'm acting guilty already.
Right.
That's the Catholic in me.
Regardless of your innocence, you are going to come off to the cops very fucking guilty in this scenario, particularly when you keep referring to it as the evidence. It is not even your dad's skull. It's just a skull that he had to work on as a dentist. Like, it's been around forever. There's no biohazard. It's completely fine to... But is there, and this might be a bit disrespectful, but could you combine two of the things that you identify? Firstly, saying goodbye to your father, but also saying goodbye to the long and tumultuous relationship you've had with the bins in that particular apartment. Could you put it on the top of the bin? So put some rubbish in, then just place the skull on the top of the bin, and then just put your bin out way too early and wait, sort of like bait bus style, for like people to come along.
Bait bin.
Right. So lure people to your enticing bin out there on the curb, looking to be filled up with the rubbish that they have in their hands, the dirty, dirty bin. And then when they go to open the lid, they see the skull, they get a little fright, and they are forced in that moment to evaluate whether they should have been putting rubbish in that bin or not.
Well, what would you do if you were sneaking across to dump some rubbish in a neighbour's bin and you saw a skull? Would you call the police? No, you're Mr. I don't get involved. You wouldn't do shit.
I would pretend that I had never seen the skull.
Would you really though, if it was a human skull? I mean, you wouldn't know if it was real or not, I guess. It could be a prop or something.
Yeah, my initial thought would be that somebody wouldn't put a human skull, if they were just disposing of a body, that they wouldn't just put it in their bin. So my immediate assumption would be that it wasn't that it wasn't anything sus, but my also other impulse would be, and I'm going to settle on that being the correct assumption and do no further investigation. I'm sure it's fine.
Well, it's funny you should bring up the bins, because on my return to Sydney, the bins which normally sit on the street, as discussed numerous times on this podcast, weren't there. And the downstairs, the neighbours that I've had the run-ins with, the ones who run the shop, they have some bins in their courtyard, but the ones that sit on the street weren't there. And so as I'm tidying up the apartment, I'm like, where the hell are the bins? Where am I going to put my rubbish? So I just assumed that what's happened, because I think I mentioned it on the podcast, the council set out a note saying no bins on the footpath. You've got to keep them on your premises. You can't just keep them out on the street. So I assumed that what had happened is that my landlord had taken note of that and instructed all the people who were renting to bring their bins in. So I went and dumped my rubbish in my neighbour's bin downstairs, thinking, well, that's the communal bin. But then I spoke to my other neighbour, who lives underneath me, Dean, and he was like, no, I don't know where the bins are. They disappeared like 3 days ago, and we have no idea where they went. That's the other guy's. That's his personal use bin. So then I'm like, motherfucker, like I have to now go back down into this guy's bin and pull the rubbish out, even though I hate these guys and they really have made my life very difficult over the last 5 years living there, and I didn't want it, but I was like, I'll wait till it's the last day, because I've still got to go back next week. I've got more packing to do. I'll wait till the last day before I do my big fuck you, but I don't want trouble.
Fucking stuff some shit in there.
I'm going to fucking stuck a skull. Oh my God. We've arrived at what I need to do with the skull, Will. I need to fucking bury it in their courtyard and then tip off the police that there's been a murder, historical murder.
You know what it'd be though? It'd be a Netflix documentary where that's what you did as a fuck you. They dug it up. They realized it was a guy who'd been murdered, and he'd been murdered by a dentist, and your dad knew the dentist murderer. Like, you know, like he'd actually got the skull from that's how the dentist murderer. Well, he was probably like the guy behind the skull company, because there's got to be that person, right?
Yeah.
And this guy's like, we've got all these dentists who want these skulls, but you know what I don't get enough of? Skulls. You know what? This is a real like hitchhike at a table scenario.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going to start creating my own skulls.
You could call it sweet tooth or toothache.
Yes.
Sweet tooth. It always has some kind of creepy implication, the true crime stuff. I mean, do you think I could frame? No, I couldn't frame him. Because if you put an anonymous call into the cops and say, hey, look, I think that there's a skull buried in the backyard.
Like, so what's your name?
Exactly. We're tracing this call. You're actually in the police station. You're actually standing at the counter of the police station. You realize you're not making a call.
You have your finger to your ear, but you're definitely just talking to me.
All right. So I'm not gonna frame him.
No.
Okay.
You could scare him. You could just put the skull in there, and they like almost as like a warning, like just a sort of like a.
They're
curse.
such weirdos. I bet you. Like, I mean, part of me thinks that maybe they do satanic rituals at night. Like maybe this is just part of like something that they want. Like, you know, I wouldn't be surprised to see like a bloody pentagram in the floor of their shop or something like that. And this is like, oh great, human sacrifice, just what we needed.
Is there a chance that they have communed with the spirit of the dead skull?
Yeah.
And the reason that they've actually moved into that apartment is literally to be closer to you guys and closer to this skull. And they've been on this like campaign to try to like liberate the skull.
I mean, that actually checks out, because the timeline, the timeline is almost exactly then. Like, we moved into that place at the end of 2005 when my mother, 2015 when my mother died, and the clean out happened within, 6 months of that. So chances are, like, these people, are you saying like Omen style? Like there's some kind of shadowy network of Satanists to kind of like monitor, if this is some kind of like unholy relic.
Maybe they're getting messages from
the skull,
like the skull, but they need to be in close proximity to the skull to receive the messages. And so,
is that why they would always complain about the music being too loud? Because
because it was drowning out the messages.
The messages from the skull. And so, why did they get so angry when I got carpet cleaners after my dog had died? Explain what was going on there. What was the skull issue there?
Interesting. I don't know.
And why'd they build that little fence around the only tree on their nature strip so Junior couldn't take a wee? Why did they do that?
Maybe because the skull told them to.
Right. There's a
right.
plan.
So like maybe it wasn't an issue for them as much as it was an issue for the skull. We've been looking at it the wrong way around. So maybe the skull, I don't know, like the skull had a problem with Junior, or maybe the skull was lashing out because it missed Junior.
Yeah, I think so. Well, it doesn't, if every motive that they had, all their complaints and stuff was leading to one thing, what would it be? It was constant noise complaints, just sheer irrationality about sharing space, a common space with other people. Maybe, sometimes I feel like they wish for death. Like I often think that they're so miserable that maybe like life is a burden. Maybe if this is some unholy relic, maybe the skull has promised them some kind of end to their pain or life eternal.
But it's eating away at them. Maybe they've been eaten away by their devotion to this skull, right?
Right.
And the loud music is drowning out the messages that they're getting from the skull. Like, I just think the general demeanor towards you're not deserving of the skull. They worship the skull. They're getting messages from the skull, and you treat the skull like it's something you can throw in the bin when you move house. Like, that's why they resent you. That's why they hate you.
So me taking the bin and giving it to you guys, does that just make it more painful for them? Does that just draw out their agony?
Well, I guess that they may move like nearby.
Oh, no.
If we see them down the shops, then we'll know.
But I would look, if it turns out that me moving the skull will create some kind of excruciating pain for them, then I'm all for it. Let's do it. Let's do it right now.
You'll take the skull with you everywhere you go for the rest of your life.
I mean, Gemma and I have discussed like, okay, we're out of this place now. Is it like, is there any kind of like, do we want to just like put a full stop on this terrible relationship we've had with our neighbors? Like, we always thought, we have very rich friends. It's like, could we convince rich friends of ours to buy the building so we can evict them? Like, that was like our first step. And then it was like, no, maybe we just want to let them know like that the last 5 years has been amazing everything's been amazing apart from living with you guys. Like, you have just had an amazing way of making everything shit. You're terrible people. You're horrible people. You don't know what it's like to live in a community. But then I'm like, who's feeling better for that? Like, there is a sense of me that's like, I'd love to just tell them to go fuck themselves, because it has been the only drawback of living in that apartment was these terrible fucking neighbors who seem to have no ability to live with other people. But does it end there, do you think? Do I get the satisfaction of getting it off my chest and saying, fuck you?
I can understand the temptation, and I'm sure over my life I've given into that temptation to not be the graceful person at the end of it. But from my experience of the times where I've chosen to be the bigger person in those scenarios, then I think I feel better about those things, the ones that I was just willing to walk away from, than I feel about the ones that I feel like, let's blow this shit up and walk away from an explosion. Here's
what I've been doing. The last few days that I've been down there, I've been waiting for provocation. Like, I'm not going to instigate, but I've loaded my 6-shooter and I'm like, okay, I got a bunch of things I want to say.
Just keep walking by them going, was it?
Yeah, seriously, I'm that dude at the pub. You'll bump him on the stairs.
Did you say something, mate? Are you looking? What's that, mate?
Well, the thing about the dude is he's a real angry little passive-aggressive little gnome. Like, he doesn't actually say a lot. It's the woman who's like much more aggressive and in your face. And so I know that when the removalists arrive and the cleaners arrive, she's going to have something to say about it, because, she just fucking hates anything that disrupts the way her day goes. So I am sort of priming.
What can she say? You're moving out of a house. You have to get the house cleaned.
She'll come. Yeah, I know. But this is the thing. This is what I'm asking. See, you've already like given in after sort of taking the monk approach. You've just told her to shut up. Now, like.
Yeah, but I wouldn't get in a fight. I'd just be like, come on, that's ridiculous. We're moving out of a house. Like, we're going to be gone from your hair. This is the last you're ever going to have to deal with this. Let's just not have a fight today.
Okay. But last time, Will, you remember last time I tried to do that? She unplugged the hose of the carpet cleaner so we couldn't get the job done. So what happens?
And then I would dial up the Kid Leroy's album and to the track that he does with Machine Gun Kelly called "Fuck You Goodbye," and I would play it as loud as I could over and over on repeat. And I would put it on repeat and leave the house. Move, and just be willing to walk away from a stereo just so that you can have that playing.
Buy the stereo just to leave it behind. That's amazing. That's actually, you actually give me ideas, because there is a stereo there that we're not taking with us. I was just going to take it to a charity shop, but maybe
you're standing outside their apartment, John Cusack style, with the stereo above your head, just blasting "Fuck You Goodbye."
I love it. I reckon that's great. Will, we've got some mail. If you want to send us a message, you can. You can just go to tofop.com, and there's contact forms for all our podcasts down there. Willosophy, 2 Guys, 1 Cup, TOFOP. Who's on Willosophy this week, Will?
Willosophy this week. Oh, Damien Power. Very funny Brisbane comedian, Damien Power. I think 3 or 4-time Best Show nominee at the Melbourne Comedy Festival, but just a very long, rambling, deep and hilarious and silly conversation with Damien. I really enjoyed it. It's a good episode.
And we also have an AFL adjacent podcast called 2 Guys, 1 Cup, which is just as this season drags on and St Kilda find new and humiliating ways to lose games. It's just getting worse and worse for me. But pretty good year for you, right, with the Bulldogs?
Yeah. But, we rarely talk about AFL on the podcast, to be honest. If you really are more interested in what, players' favourite movies were 3 years ago, or why their favourite comedian is always Carl Barron and never me, then we have a podcast for you.
Actually, someone did send us a message where they had compiled all the pocket profiles we'd done and how many of them had listed Carl Barron. It's something like there's eight Carl Barrons as a favourite comedian. There's no other comedians listed. I think maybe Kevin Hart gets
Peter
a look in
Hallier.
once or twice.
I think Peter Hallier got a look in at one stage. Strawny might got a look in.
But geez, Carl Barron, he's really got that market cornered. Well, we just have in relation to how you'd escape some AI, we just have one quick email here from Andrew, who says, hey, Will and Charlie, just finished listening to the episode. We're trying to send messages without alerting your drone killers. Will, you have 2 loyal furry analog allies. Surely, during your month in the waterfall cave, you could train your dogs to deliver a message to Charlie.
I can barely train my dogs to go to the bathroom.
I was
like
gonna say.
95% of the time outside.
Your dogs aren't really they're not
Trained?
Yeah. They're not
Dogs that
kind of
obey
dogs.
orders in any way. Dogs that you think you can actually tell something to. No, not really, no.
And they haven't really been to my house, so they couldn't Homeward Bound style. You know how some animals, they just instinctively know how to find their way to a place? Like, they wouldn't be able to find their way to my... Have they been here at all?
Ramona wouldn't leave the cave. I think in the car, but Ramona would not leave the cave. If she was in the cave with me, she would just stay in the cave with me. Like wherever I was, she would just stay. And Winnie might start with enthusiasm, but will get distracted by food and then just roll in something. And then that would be the end of that entire plan.
JD writes in with a late entry for Machofop. Hey lads, I realise I'm far too late for this, but I was listening to the Machofop saga unfolding, wishing I had something good to contribute, and I'd love to know if this recent adventure would have qualified me if it happened earlier. Okay, so this is a unofficial submission for Machofop. He just wants a take. I recently got into downhill mountain biking after going out a few times with a mate. Started pretty slow, sticking mostly to flat tracks and skipping the bigger jumps. But it wasn't long before I was hitting 40 k's an hour downhill on a gravel track and doing jumps built for far younger men. I'm in my early 30s. It wasn't long before I bought my own bike. The second trip out on my new bike, it happened. I was flying down a hill and the tires slipped on the loose gravel. Before I knew it, my forehead struck a giant rock. I was wearing a helmet, but the force of the rock pushed it upwards, making it mostly useless. In fairness, it was a road bike helmet, not made for mountain biking. I dragged my bike off the track to get out of the way of the other riders and put my hand up to assess the damage. Safe to say it wasn't great. The guy right behind me stopped to help and tried to keep me calm until an ambulance arrived. The first thing the paramedic said was that he could see my skull. Was it my skull? Oh no, different skull. They walked me back 30 minutes through the bush and I spent the next 2 days in hospital, had a bit of surgery and now have a scar across my forehead and get called Harry Potter pretty regularly. And what might take away the macho points, my wife made me sell the mountain bike immediately. But considering we have a 3-year-old baby girl and a baby girl on the way, there was no way I was putting up a fight. In slightly different circumstances, I mightn't have been around. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, JD. That's
Firstly,
pretty much
JD sounds like what you'd have to drink a lot of before you got me on a mountain bike going down a fucking mountain. Secondly, JD, this is only how this story was ever going to end. The mistake you made was when you went in the first place.
Yeah.
I'm glad you had some good times on the jumps and stuff, but you nearly fucking killed yourself and left your family behind because you clearly were doing something that you should not be doing.
But if JD was 20 and he was doing it, would you say, yeah, that's fair enough. Go smash your head. Is it just because he has responsibilities now?
If JD was Tony Hawk, I'd enter him in the X Games, but he is not. He's in his early 30s and he's gone out mountain biking with his mates when he's got a young fucking child. And then he's gone, you know what? I should invest some of our family money into buying myself my own bike so I can almost kill myself.
I'm amazed that he struck that rock with enough impact that he could split his head open and expose his skull, but he was still conscious.
Yeah. I mean, you'd think in that moment, the one thing you'd want to be is unconscious.
Yeah. That's when you just want to wake up and get told how amazing that accident was. Whoa, you wouldn't believe it, man. You split your head open. You don't want to fucking walk for half an hour through the bush holding your head together.
I want to wake up with a headache and not be sure why.
My brother told me this story once, and I don't know if it's an urban myth, but he reckons that, so we used to have to catch the train line to school. There's about a 40-minute train ride into the city. And a game we used to play was we'd force open the doors and you would stick your head out or spit out or do all that kind of shit. Every kid did it. And my brother told me that there was a kid from the rival school who did it, stuck his head out, head got hit by a pole, And when they arrived at the other station, his two mates were having to hold his skull together. He was conscious. They had to walk him off the train, like blood pouring down his face, holding his skull together like a split watermelon. Urban myth?
I'm going to say urban myth. But urban myth created by somebody who was trying to make the point that some shit like that could happen. Like, it feels like to me somebody's taken a bit too much creative license. I feel like that person would be dead in that story if it had happened exactly.
Well, it depends
how you
at
said
what
happened.
stage of the train taking off. If the train was just pulling out of the station, it wasn't like travelling it.
So the train's moving out of the station at 45 kilometres an hour, but there's another train moving in the opposite direction at 75
I think it was a
kilometres an
pole.
hour.
I don't think it was a train. I think he struck a pole, but your point is made. Oren writes in, TOFOP. As nearly a tradie, my dad did geotechnical construction, foundation, sea walls, retaining walls, etc. I worked for him in high school and college, and I have an architecture degree and I work in design. I would like to help you answer 2 questions. Because remember I asked that question, is it helpful when tradies come round to sort of go out and help them, or am I more of a nuisance? He says, 1, your help is only really useful if you either have some experience in a trade or can do things like carry around materials so they'll be ready for them the next day in the location they need to be if they are exceptionally heavy. But do it after they leave for the day so you stay out of the way. Right. Okay. Well, I think I got 1/3 of that correct. I was moving around heavy things, but I was not preparing materials for the next day, and I definitely was getting in their way.
That does make sense, though. That's like, because that's making the best of both your time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess the last thing you want is some fucking gung-ho dickhead jumping on the tools. Like, don't, mate. Like, A, you're probably going to lose a finger. B, you're going to slow us down, and we're just going to have to fix up what you've tried to do.
Well, I guess it's like, so we have like a very big garden and a very kind of involved garden here. And so like once a fortnight, there's a guy who comes out for like, he's there from like 8 a.m. to like 1 p.m. And he like, you know, works on the garden. Like I work on it constantly, but he actually comes in as an expert and knows, you know, what to prune to what point and whatever. And I have found the best way for us to work is me leave him alone and I go and do my work when he's doing his work. And then the next day I collect all the shit and put it in a pile and burn it. That's my bit of it. He doesn't need to do that. I just need to clean up afterwards from what he's done.
Oren continues, someone unskilled offering to help is usually just more work trying to train them into doing it wrong, so you have to do it again. Otherwise, the best way to save money is to trade some skills you have for some skills that they have. If they want to do a radio ad or a podcast plug, trade your much more valuable skills for theirs or any other skills that you or your wife have. It's much more useful. 2, the tool brand is pronounced Cryobi, like the sound that wakes you up at night, plus Old Ben from Star Wars. The reason being the brand has nothing to do with rye, and within 20 or 40 hours of use, they'll be completely useless, and you will cry over the fact that you didn't buy more expensive or better tools not made by TTI like Ryobi, Rigid, or Milwaukee. Thanks for watching, and thanks for all the wonderful conversations between 2 old mates. All right, so I just bought a new Ryobi tool as well, by the way. I bought a second drill, so I'm fucked now.
No, I think Cryobi is, I think that it's Daddy's first toolkit, right?
Okay. Yep.
This is your starter kit. You know,
it's
you
my
get
Fisher Price.
Exactly. Like you're not an expert. This is talking from people who know what they're talking. Then you'll move into like the actual tools of the trade.
Yeah. What are that, like Makita and shit?
I've got no idea and I never will.
Michael wrote in. It's a complicated subject line. The TOFOP, killer AI and moldy dicks. Oh, I mean decks.
Okay.
Got the pun. Great. Okay. Hey guys, add another doctor listener to sorry. Let me try that again. Add another doctor to the listener list. I'm a research doctor, a PhD, rather than a medical doctor. So keeping me laughing isn't yet keeping people living. But I'm medical adjacent. I'm working on wound healing treatments for diabetics. So it might ultimately keep people living. We'll take it, right?
Okay, yeah, I'll take it. Absolutely.
Regarding the thought of Will evading the killer drone and hiding while leaving clues for Charlie, it seems like the easy way would be the Patreon messages, but it would have to be obscure. Something like things that are obviously wrong or things said off podcast that only Charlie would know. Mentioning something specific in AFL but getting it wrong, or saying Will always liked Zack Snyder's gloomy Superman, or conversely didn't like the Nolan Batman films, seems like a starting point to trigger Charlie's suspicions that something is up for a new listener question. Yeah, but how are you accessing a computer to leave a Patreon message?
That's difficult. And plus there's a credit card trail on those sort of things. Plus also it's hard to differentiate when you listen to our stuff what we're getting wrong on purpose or we're getting wrong completely by accident. So
yeah.
I feel
we don't remember what we've talked about. So, how would I know it was you? Like, if you're using some kind of nom de plume or pseudonym, how would I know it was you without you saying it was you?
It's me, Barcus Montempelli.
Oh, yeah, got it. Yeah, that's Will. Drone strike that internet cafe. Regarding the dirty deck, expecting a Fosdyke with a dirty Dicky deck, and Charlie thinking he's a bit colourblind, that may be the case, or it might be the case that Gemma is seeing the mildew with a mild superpower. She might be, and I believe it's pronounced tetrachromatic. That is, having two types of red sensing cones in her eyes, effectively a fourth type of light sensor in the eye. This allows allows these people to see extra shades of red as opposed to most of us with just 3 light sensors in the eye. Sure, it's a pretty mild superpower, but it allows millions of extra colours to be seen compared to regular folk. It is thought to be about 1 in 10 women. Oh, there you go. But likely a higher rate in artists. Well, there you go. But this is just conjecture from online reports, as I haven't yet seen any data on the rate of artists. Unfortunately, online tests aren't reliable, as RGB, red, green, blue monitors don't have a wide enough range, so you can't test yourself easily. Someone did actually send me an online colorblind test, which I passed, so it made me feel better, but according to Michael, maybe that wasn't the best way to see. Maybe going online isn't the best way to diagnose yourself as being colorblind or not.
You know what? If it's 1 in 10 women, like the likelihood that Gemma would have it, like particularly as you said, photographer, artist, like director now, like it is about, it would not surprise me that if she had like a heightened sense of visual recognition.
Well, we met an artist around here who were looking at she had some property that we're looking at for a location, and she had this like really psychedelic artwork, not like psychedelic in the imagery, but the colors really like fluoro bold colors. And she said that she was born with like whatever the color cones. She had like extra, like, but not just one. She had like multiple. So she sees like all these variations in shade and color and certain colors. And so that's what she paints, what she sees, which are these really like full on, psychedelic. It would be great to take maybe 20 and take mushrooms and look at some of her artwork. Michael continues, if you're interested, here's the basics on tetrachromacy, and here are some more details from Newcastle University. I will not read those links, but keep up the laughs. P.S. I can't wait for Illegal to reschedule in Cairns. Any chance of TOFOP touring the regions? Well, first things first, Illegal, any reschedule happening?
Don't know yet. Like it's still one of those years where it's hard to. I am doing July 3rd at the Enmore, which is selling pretty well, but there's still tickets available. What you're talking about, Will, and July 4th at the Brisbane Powerhouse. The first show sold out on pre-sale, so we added a second show, which is about half sold out already. So if you want to come and see what you're talking about, Will, July 4 at the Brisbane Powerhouse, and I think Currumbin is sold out, and there'll probably be some other shows at some point, but. No plans at the moment.
And we have no plans to tour TOFOP to Cairns, but we haven't, we're potentially doing a live show later this year. We can't announce it for specific reasons, but there will be hopefully a TOFOP live in the future, maybe multiple TOFOP lives. Anyway, this is from Claire. Just wanted to write in to let you know that at age 28, I just watched Point Break for the first time.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It was
good.
It was
amazing, fantastic.
It was
the best
fucking
movie
great.
Of all time.
It was fucking great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. How anyone could not enjoy Keanu and Swayze, I do not know. It was 2 hours well spent. A friend of mine, hi Elle, I know you're listening, thinks that Patrick Swayze seems like a guy with Hugh Jackman's talent mixed with Chris Hemsworth's cool guy attitude. Thoughts? Well, so Patrick Swayze as Bodhi is like, or as a just, I think that Patrick Swayze seems like a guy with Hugh Jackman's talent mixed with Chris Hemsworth cool guy attitude.
Okay, so basically just saying that, like, because
He's a
Hugh
mix of
Jackman
masculine
can sing, he
and-
can dance, he can, all those sort of things.
Yeah.
But with a bit more of the cool guy, Chris Hemsworth style swagger,
Yeah.
that easy confidence that Hugh Jackman kind of has, but he also, there's something a bit more polished about Hugh. Maybe.
Yeah, I think Patrick Swayze was cool in his day. He had more of that kind of Texas Matthew McConaughey thing going on, rather. Like Chris Hemsworth's got the Aussie kind of surfer thing nailed down. I think that, I mean, it's pretty hilarious. Like the character of Bodhi is so ridiculous. Like this kind of philosopher / bank robber / and he pulls it off. So I think you have to be pretty charismatic and likable to pull off such an absolutely ridiculous character.
I mean, in a way, though, that character is almost somebody you do see now, not necessarily the bank robber bit, but the sort of, psychedelic ayahuasca
right.
style, like, cult of wellness. There is a real sense of, you can see these people, you see them online, their life philosophy is a very Bodhi-like philosophy.
Yeah. I mean, what's that thing he says to Keanu in the surf when Keanu finally puts the cuffs on and he's like, no way, man. I can't be in one of those metal coffins on the road every day. And it's just like, yeah, man, fuck the system. We need to break out.
Right? You guys want to go to Peru, do some ayahuasca?
You know what he is? It's Hansel from Zoolander. That Hansel from Zoolander is Bodhi in a comedic setting.
Right. But Patrick Swayze manages to make it work as a character.
Yeah, you're right. Fucking good film. I haven't watched it since we've discussed it. I might have to throw it on this week. This last one is from Chris. Intros to TOFOP. Hi, I love the show. Is there a chance that the TOFOP guests can be introduced? It's a small thing, but us drivers can't pick up the phone to see who's in the podcast notes. Cheers. Is this something, do you introduce your guests on TOFOP or do you just start talking?
I say hello and welcome to FOFOP. I'm Will Anderson, and joining me is guest Charlie,
Blah, blah, blah.
and then whatever their name is.
But you don't give a count of who they are or what they do or anything like that.
It's guys, it's Justin Hamilton, like it always is.
I think this is a bit of feedback addressed specifically to me because since I've taken over FOFOP, I've forgot about intros. I just started talking because generally, we're talking to friends of ours and I just would get into the moment of just talking to them. But with this latest episode, Paddy Bramall, I specifically made a point of recapping who he was and some of the things he'd been in. So yes, we can introduce. I will make more of an effort to introduce people from now on. We forgot to plug the FOFOP episode when we were talking about the shows before, but it's a really good listen. Paddy filmed a sitcom last year during the pandemic, and it's a really, really interesting story about what it's like shooting a multi-camera sitcom where A, you can't do table reads, B, the cast can't even be in the same room as each other, and C, there's no fucking audiences. So he literally was doing a sitcom to no one. And then watching the episode where they put the laughter in afterwards, it's a real head trip. It's a really good listen.
He once got mad at me online, Paddy Bramwell. Have I told you this story before? I don't know. I made some joke on Gruen that he was like mad about, and I was like,
"What was the joke?"
Like, I was making fun of like some character in an ad, my usual stick in that situation, and like I think his response was like, but that's just a working actor trying to, make a living in the industry or whatever. And I was like,
oh, well, chances are it made it his. I would hazard a guess and to say he was friends with that person.
Absolutely, I'm sure it was a mate of his, but I wasn't making fun of his fucking mate. I was making fun of a character in an ad, and I would have thought that Paddy Bramall, of all people, would know there's a difference between making fun of an actor and making fun of the character they're fucking playing.
Well, I guess there's one listener we won't be getting this week and listening to FOFOP.
Like, fuck you, bringing Paddy Bramall into my fucking podcast. No, I always liked him. I'm a fan of him as a performer. I was just not a fan of that one specific piece of feedback that I've clearly held on to.
All right, that's the show for this week. If you want to support us, the best way to do that is at patreon.com/TOFOP. We put lots of bonus stuff up there all week. A lot of Patreon messages. We need the mailbags filling up again. We're getting caught behind again, so we'll have to get through some more Patreon messages. And we've got another bonus episode that I want to record soon. So we'll announce that once it's done. But for now, I'm Charlie Clausen.
I'm Will Anderson.